You clicked because somebody promised you the whole Bible told the Amish way, and part of you thinks that's impossible in one sitting. Stay with me, because I'm not going to preach it to you. I'm going to walk you through it the way I saw it lived, in plain kitchens and plowed fields, from the first page to the last. Here's the claim I want you to hold on to. The Amish didn't just read this book. They turned it into a set of daily habits, and one of those habits, a single command that almost every modern church quietly skips over, is the reason a people who earn less than you and me stay out of debt and outlive the rest of us in health. That command survived among the plain folk when everyone else let it die, and I'm going to take you to the exact place it's written. A few lines buried in the 15th chapter of Deuteronomy, kept alive in a book the Amish still own that most people have never heard of, printed in 1660. By the end, you'll know what it says and how to start using it inside the ordinary house you're sitting in right now. I remember the first time it hit me. I was standing in a farm kitchen outside a little place in Holmes County, Ohio, holding a cup of coffee I didn't order, watching an old man read a worn German Bible at the head of a long table while his grandkids came in from chores with mud on their boots. I'd spent my whole life paying for things I later learned I never needed. And I felt, right there, like I'd walked into a system I'd been locked out of my entire life. So let me start where the book starts. In the beginning, God made a garden and put a man in it to work it and keep it. That's Genesis chapter 2. And most people read right past that word work like it's a punishment that came later. It isn't. The working came before anything went wrong. Labor with your hands, out in the open, was the first thing a human being was ever given to do. Now here's the strange part I couldn't shake. The Amish took that literally, and they never let go of it, and it shows up in their bodies in a way that stopped a university researcher cold. In 2004, a scientist named David Bassett from the University of Tennessee did something nobody had done before. He talked an old order Amish community in Ontario into wearing step counters for a week, grown men and women going about their normal days. And when he read the numbers, he thought his equipment was broken. The men were averaging around 18,000 steps a day. The women, around 14,000. Some of the men were logging over 50,000. 50,000 in a single day. Most Americans today don't clear 3,000. And the obesity rate in that community? About 4%. Adult obesity in the wider country at the time was pushing 30-40% and climbing. Same human bodies, same appetites. These people eat butter, lard, bread, pie, gravy, the very things we've been told for 50 years will kill us. And they're lean and strong into their 70s and 80s. So the first clue clicked into place for me right there. It was never mainly about the food. It was about a life built on the very first job in the book, working the ground with your own two hands, sun up to sundown, every day, the way Genesis describes it before a single thing had gone wrong. But that raised a much bigger question, because plenty of people work hard and still fall apart by 60. Hard labor alone doesn't explain a whole community aging that well. There had to be something else the book gave them. Something about how they stop. And that's where the second command comes in, and it's the one the modern world threw in the trash. Keep going, because the book itself slows down here, right after all that work, and gives a rule that sounds almost too simple to matter. 6 days you labor, the 7th you rest. Genesis rests, Exodus commands it. It runs like a heartbeat all the way through, And I'll be honest with you, for most of my life I treated that as a nice old suggestion. Take it easy on Sunday, sleep in, maybe skip church. That is not what the Amish mean by it, and it is not what the book means by it. When I say the Amish keep the Sabbath, I mean they stop completely. No shopping, no selling, no fields worked for money, no stores open. The buggies go to worship, held in somebody's home or barn, not in some building with a mortgage. And then, and this is the part that got me, nothing is bought and nothing is sold for a full day. No commerce touches that day at all. Now think about what that actually does to a household over a year. One full day in 7 where not a single dollar leaves your hands. 52 days a year where the whole machine of buying and being sold to just shuts off. I started adding it up in my head, and I felt a little sick because I realized how many years I'd spent treating every single day as a day to spend. But there's a deeper thing happening in that stillness, and modern medicine is only now catching up to it. When you stop striving, when you drop out of the noise and the buying and the hurrying for a set day, your body shifts out of the stress state it's been stuck in, the stress hormones fall, the nervous system settles. Rest, real rest, on a fixed rhythm, isn't laziness, it's maintenance. It's the 7th day doing to your body what oil does to an engine. The Amish never lost that rhythm because they never let the world set their clock. Because to understand why these people cling so hard to the old ways, you have to go back to a prison. There's a castle at a town called Passaw on the water, and in the years around 1535 to 1540, Anabaptist believers, the spiritual grandparents of today's Amish, were locked in its dungeons for refusing to bend to the official church, and down in that dark, waiting to die, they wrote songs. Those songs became a book called the Osbund, and here's what stops people cold when I tell them. The Osbund is still sung today in Amish worship. It is the oldest hymn book in continuous use by any Christian group in the world. Songs written by condemned prisoners almost 500 years ago, sung slow and without any instrument, by children who will grow up and sing them to their own children. Those people died rather than let an outside power tell them how to live and what to believe. So when I hear folks laugh at the Amish for being backward, for refusing the easy modern way, I think about that castle. They're not backward. They watched, in their own family memory, what happens when you hand over your life to a big institution that promises to take care of you. They wrote it in songs so they'd never forget. So the clue deepened for me. This isn't nostalgia. This is a people who made a hard decision centuries ago to keep their independence at any cost, and who built every daily habit around not depending on outside powers. The work, the rest, the refusal. But refusal of what, exactly? That's the thread I pulled next. And that's where I found out somebody had been quietly benefiting from the rest of us forgetting all of this. Here's the turn, therefore, because once you see who gained from this knowledge dying, you can't unsee it. For most of us, the moment something goes wrong, the roof, the illness, the accident, the death in the family, we reach for a company, insurance, a policy, a monthly payment we've made for years to a business betting we won't need it. And behind that, a whole government system we pay into our entire working lives on the promise that we'll be caught when we fall. The Amish, by and large, do none of that. No commercial insurance. And for a long stretch of the 20th century, that put them on a collision course with the most powerful tax authority in the country. Let me tell you about a man named Valentine Byler. He was an Amish farmer in Pennsylvania, and in the years leading up to 1961, he refused to pay Social Security taxes, not because he was cheap, because his faith told him that taking care of the old and the widowed and the sick was the job of the church and the community, not a distant government office. To pay into that system was, to him, to say his own people couldn't be trusted to care for their own. It was a denial of the very command they lived by. So in 1961, the Internal Revenue Service came for him. They couldn't easily take his money, so they took his horses. 3 of them, seized right out of the field in the spring, during plowing season, the worst possible time when a farmer needs his horses most. They sold them at auction to cover a tax bill of around $300. And here's the thing. When that story got out, an Amish man's plow horses seized by federal agents while he tried to bring in a crop, the country was disgusted. It became a national embarrassment, and it forced the question out into the open: why is the government dragging a peaceful farmer's horses off his land? Because he'd rather his own church take care of him. The pressure built for years, and finally, in 1965, Congress wrote a specific exemption into law. The Amish, and groups like them who conscientiously object and who take care of their own people, could be released from Social Security. It's on the books. It's real. A whole people carved out of the system the rest of us are told is unavoidable. Now sit with that for a second, because this is the part that changed how I see everything. We are told from the time we can work that we have no choice, that we must pay the companies, that we must feed the systems, that a person simply cannot survive without handing a piece of every paycheck to institutions that profit whether we thrive or not. And here was living proof, protected by federal law since 1965, that an entire community had said no and not only survived, but was healthier, more secure, and more free than the people paying in. And that is not an accident. That comes straight out of their history, and it's a history soaked in blood. But before I take you into that history, I want to tell you about something that helped me put all of this together in one place. If everything I've been sharing is landing for you, the work, the rest, the freedom from systems that profit off your fear, I went much deeper on all of it in a book called The Amish Blueprint. It walks through exactly how these habits translate into a modern household, step by step, the way I wish somebody had handed it to me before I spent decades feeding the wrong systems. You'll find it linked in the description below. Now, back to that castle at Passau, because to understand why these people cling so hard to the old ways, you have to feel the weight of what they survived. So who benefits from you never learning that? Every company that needs your monthly payment, every system that needs you dependent and afraid. The knowledge that you could care for your own didn't vanish by accident. It was crowded out generation by generation by people selling you the fear that you can't. But I know exactly what you're thinking right now, because I thought it too. You're thinking, that's fine for them. They've got the barns and the buggies and a whole community of 1,000 neighbors ready to rebuild your house in a day. I live on a regular street in a regular house with regular neighbors I barely know. This isn't for me. So stop, because this next part is for you specifically, the person watching this on an ordinary television in an ordinary living room with a mortgage and a car payment and no plans to buy a horse. This is the part you can start this week in the house you already own, with nothing special at all. The first thing costs you nothing, and gives you back both money and years. Pick one day, just one, and make it a day where you buy nothing and sell nothing. No stores, no online orders, no scrolling through things to purchase, no running errands that cost money. Nothing goes out. You cook what you already have. You mend instead of replace. You sit, you rest, you walk, you talk to the people in your house. I did it, skeptical the whole time, sure it would be a small thing. It was not a small thing. The first surprise was the money, because a day where spending is simply not on the table quietly kills all the little leaks you never notice, the $5 and $10 reaches that add up to hundreds a month. But the bigger surprise was what happened to me. By the evening of that first day, something in my chest had unclenched that I didn't even know was clenched. The seventh-day rest wasn't a rule taking something from me. It was handing me back a piece of my own nervous system. The second thing is the walking. You are not going to log 18,000 steps tomorrow, and nobody's asking you to. But the study that shocked that researcher wasn't about the gym. It was about ordinary movement, woven into ordinary life, all day long hanging wash on a line instead of running a dryer, walking to the mailbox and back and around, doing your own yard, carrying your own things, taking the stairs, standing to work instead of sitting. Every one of those is free. Every one of those is available to you in the house you're in. The Amish didn't get healthy at a fitness club. They got healthy by refusing the machine that was going to do their moving for them. And the third thing is the one that leads us straight into the secret I promised you at the very start, because keeping a Sabbath and keeping your body moving will save you money and add years. But it won't by itself get you free of the systems the way the Amish are free. For that you need the command they kept that everyone else buried. And it's time I took you to the exact page. Therefore, come with me all the way to the end of the story, because the whole book has been building to this and most people never notice. Turn to the 15th chapter of Deuteronomy. The people are about to enter their new land, and God gives them a law about money that is so radical no modern economy has ever dared keep it. It's called the year of release. Here's what it says. At the end of every 7 years you shall grant a release. Every creditor shall release what he has lent to his neighbor. He shall not require it of his brother, because the Lord's release has been proclaimed. Read that again slowly. Every 7 years the debts are wiped, cleared, forgiven, not renegotiated, released. The whole society hits a reset, and no man is allowed to keep another man buried under what he owes forever. And it doesn't stop there. The same passage commands something even harder for us to hear. It says, if there is a poor man among you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand. You shall open your hand wide to him and lend him sufficient for his need. And then this you shall lend, and lend without interest, because he is your brother. No interest. Among your own people, you do not profit off another man's hard season. You open your hand, you lend what he needs, and every 7 years, whatever's still owed, you let it go. Now I want you to understand what that single law does to a community that actually keeps it. It makes it almost impossible for anyone to fall into a debt hole they can never climb out of. It makes the strong the safety net for the weak instead of the predator on the weak. It kills the entire machine that most of us have spent our whole lives feeding, the machine of interest, of compounding debt, of owing more next year than you did this year. And here is the discovery that took my breath away. The thing I found threaded through everything I'd seen in those plain kitchens. The Amish still live this, not the exact calendar of it, but the heart of it in full. They lend to each other without interest. Their church keeps a fund, not a company, not a policy, a fund of their own money set aside, and when a family is crushed by a hospital bill or a burned barn or a dead breadwinner, that fund opens its hand and covers the need. They call it by different names in different communities, this mutual aid, but it is the year of release and the open hand of Deuteronomy 15 kept alive and working in the 21st century. That's why Valentine Byler let them take his horses rather than pay Social Security. He wasn't refusing to be cared for. He already had care, better care, from his own people, obeying a command older than any government on earth. He was refusing to trade the open hand of his brothers for the cold hand of a system that profits off fear. And you can hold this in your hands too, because they wrote it down and kept it. There's a book, thick and old, called The Martyr's Mirror, first printed in the year 1660 by a man named Thieleman van Brott. Next to the Bible, it is the most treasured book in an Amish home. It records the stories of those who died rather than surrender their faith and their way of living, and it exists precisely to remind every generation why they keep the hard commands the rest of the world dropped. Their whole way of handling money and care and one another rests on a written confession from 1632, the Dordrecht Confession, that binds them to carry one another's burdens as the book commands. This is not a vibe. It is documented, dated, printed, and preserved because they knew people would try to tell them it couldn't be done. So here is the secret finale. The thing you can actually start doing within days, taken straight from that 15th chapter and the way the plain folk keep it. Open your hand, on purpose, on a schedule. Start your own release fund. It doesn't take a church of 1,000. It can start with your own household and one or two people you trust, family, a neighbor, an old friend. Every single one of you puts a small, fixed amount into a set-aside pool every month. Not for yourselves, for whoever among you gets hit first. It doesn't earn interest, nobody profits, it sits there as an open hand waiting, and you keep the release too. Once a year, sit down and look at the small debts owed to you and to each other, the $20, the borrowed tool, the favor that turned into an anchor around somebody's neck, and you let the small ones go. You grant a release, not because they earned it, because that is the command that keeps a people free. And I have watched with my own eyes what it builds, a web of care that no insurance company and no government office can touch, and that no fear can sell you out of. That's the whole book, Amish-style. It opens with a man given work in a garden, and everything after is a long fight to keep human beings from being owned not by kings, not by companies, not by their own debts. The Amish read the last page the same way they read the first, and they decided the open hand was worth more than the full pocket. I spent most of my life on the other side of that, paying the companies, feeding the systems, afraid to stop, afraid to rest, afraid there'd be no one to catch me but a corporation that was betting against me the whole time. And what I found in those plain kitchens with the worn German Bibles wasn't a religion I had to join. It was a door I didn't know was open, a whole way of living that had been standing right there the entire time, quietly taken off the table by everyone who needed me dependent and paying. If you've ever felt in your gut that the real knowledge, the kind that makes a person free, has been pushed aside on purpose to protect somebody else's profit, then you already understand these people better than the world that mocks them. You're the kind of person who suspects there's more, and you're right. So tell me one thing down in the comments and be specific because I read them. Which one are you actually going to try first, the day where nothing is bought or sold, or starting a small open hand fund with someone you trust? say which one, and say why. I want to know where you're starting. And if you want to keep pulling these threads with me, walking back into the ways that were taken from us, one quiet decision at a time, come along. This is for the people trying to recover what got buried. Next, I'm going to show you the Amish rule about what they will and will not let into the home itself, the specific test they use to decide whether a new thing helps the family or slowly eats it, and once you hear it, you'll never look at a single device in your house the same way again. Before you go, let me tell you where this goes next. Inside the plain living circle, I continue this video walking you through that Deuteronomy 15 debt command in your own home. And if something puzzles you, ask me directly, and a real person answers, not a machine. Folks like you already belong here. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime with one click. Come join me.